Hello and welcome to VFX Talks, a show about leadership and development in the VFX industry. My name is Alfred Lindahl, and in this episode I'm joined by VFX Supervisor Pietro Ponti. Pietro started his career in Italy, but soon moved to London for 10 years at Double Negative. I got to know him at Important Looking Pirates, where he was a VFX Supervisor and head of VFX, and we worked closely in coaching the artists and leaders there. He's now back in London, supervising some really cool projects at Industrial Light and Magic, which he of course can't talk about today. His most recent projects include Lovecraft Country, where his team actually won 2 VES awards for compositing and effects. He supervised on Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, Carnival Row, Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom, and his CV also goes back to being a CG supervisor on Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them and Terminator Genesis. He was also a lead on a few Harry Potter movies, The Dark Knight and so on. And although he's been a VFX supervisor for quite some time now, his LinkedIn profile still says TD Generalist / VFX Supervisor, and I think that tells a lot on where his passion lies. But enough introduction, here's my conversation with Pietro Ponti. All right, welcome to the show, and it's great to have you on. And why don't you start by introducing yourself a bit, just quickly who you are, what you do.
Yeah, sure thing. Hey, Alfred. Very nice to be here. So I'm Pietro. I was born in Italy. I grew up there for most of my life, and then when I found out about visual effects, eventually that took me abroad. So I've been now living abroad for about 16 years or so, and most of that time has been doing visual effects. I worked in London for most of the time, Double Negative, and then I moved to Sweden, where we met, and I worked there at the Important Looking Pirates, and then now I'm back in London. I've been here for about a year, and I work with ILM, and my current job is VFX Supervisor.
Awesome. Yeah, to give some background, we work really closely together on Important Looking Pirates.
Yes.
Where we had a lot of coaching sessions with artists and leaders, and yeah, we did a lot of recruitment and stuff. But I think what we talked about mostly was the leadership part, and that's also why I wanted to bring you on the show, because I felt a lot of people really liked being on your team, to have you as their VFX supervisor, and it seemed like you created such a nice atmosphere in your teams, on your projects, and it felt like you're like a natural leader. It seems like you're really passionate about VFX. Well, I know you are really passionate about VFX. You sit up late at night doing Houdini stuff, and then you really care about people. So to me, it felt like you really saw everyone on the team, and you really cared about their well-being and stuff like that. So what do you think? Is this a fair assessment? Am I onto something?
I mean, well, thank you very much. Of course, that's a very nice assessment. I mean, what I can speak to that is, for sure, yes, I really do enjoy this job a lot. I'm one of the lucky people that can do what they like doing as their job, aside from, the free time. I feel like when I think of leadership from my point of view, and what you were saying there now about liking to be on the team, and it's something that I was very lucky to have several times in my career kind of done to me. So I guess you could say there is a bit of an element of paying it forward here. Again, during my years at Double Negative, which were, let's say, my formative years in visual effects, I always had very good leaders from a human perspective, right? They were really understanding, and they were really, engaging with us as a team. And so I'm really trying to emulate them. I mean, of course, I'm trying to take out of each one of them the the things I think work best to ultimately get people in their most comfortable zone to to produce the best work they can, right? It's really ultimately what it all comes up to. I mean, I did not. I remember actually quite clearly why I decided to, let's say, try and be, a lead first and then a supervisor of sorts. Remember, it was all to do about involvement in the process, right? I really like visual effects, as you said. I really like the process of it all, and I realized that the only way to ultimately be the most generalist possible was to supervise. I've always been a generalist as trade, and I enjoyed that because I love jumping around, doing different things, between different projects, explore different techniques or new tools. And, that was really great fun. But I also realized that I was not being exposed to more, for instance, like, let's say, the set work or even the production conversations, client management, all of those areas were something that attracted me extremely too. And I was really fortunate because I was a double negative when it was growing exponentially. There were a lot of opportunities for growth. And so I just went with the flow of that. And I understood that if you took responsibility early, that will give you more trust in return, and that was the path really. So yeah, but to go back to your question more directly again, yes, I think is a fair assessment in that way, but I also think that is a byproduct of who I've been exposed to, rather than coming from me directly. Yeah. So
Nice. And have you been like consciously working on your leadership skills and stuff like that, or have you only just like gone with the flow? Or
not until like a few years back, I would say. It's yeah, there's a lot of talk of leadership, of course, as you grow, through the different positions, that becomes more and more a presence. But I have to say that's more like, again, recent. I think when I started supervising, there wasn't much in terms of coaching or awareness, again, in the industry about leadership as a specific job. And, you just ended up doing it because you were doing it right. And they needed people that took responsibility, and took ownership. And that's how you ended up doing it, really. There was not much coaching into it. So I never really thought about it much beyond, trying and be as nice as possible. Because again, I was really, really keenly aware that was what made me a better artist, is when people were nice to me and they were treating me like a grown up, and they were leaving me space, of course, to do things. That's a very hard one, by the way, but we can talk about that in a second. uh, so yeah, so it was something I just ended up into, and then as I kept on doing it, I thought more and more about it as a profession itself, as as a thing to do. More recently, yeah.
but now as a VFX supervisor, are you doing hands-on work as well, or are you only like a full-time leader? How's the balance now?
It's a good question. I mean, that is my biggest struggle. And it's funny, I see that's the biggest struggle for many others in the same position, in the sense that, especially with our job that is so fast-paced and evolves so quickly, you really don't want to lose that skill that you had, that when you were doing shots only, or doing assets and all of that. You really want to try and keep in touch with it as much as possible. I think it's fair to say that in jobs like VFX Supervisor, you do have a choice. Of course, you always have a choice of how to use your time, which is great, something I really value. And you can do hands-on work, of course, especially at the beginning of the show. You can get involved in different things, but at the same time, uh, the thing I say to myself, this is something I think about a lot, and I always try to think as I'm doing this, right? As I'm doing this nice shot or this asset, like what am I not doing, right? Who am I leaving without clarification, or have I done that meeting to talk about that random stuff I brought up in dailies, to clarify further? And what I notice is that, at the end of the day, if you ask yourself that question, you end up with not much time to do work yourself. And also something, the other question, the companion question to that is like, is there someone on the team that could do this better, or would they enjoy doing, and you're just taking it away from them, right? But then, on the other side, conversely, let's say that gives me nightmares of losing touch completely with the job, which I'm sure it's happening, because I mean I'm spending so much time not doing that, not doing shots and renders and models and all of that, and as a result you just lose it a bit, right? There's no two ways about it. But it's a hard balance. I think it's again, as I said, is a balance. As a result, it's going to be a struggle constantly, because the weights change every day for one or the other reason. There's so many variables. So it's something I'm trying to accept as just the nature of the job, right? And trying to be chilled about it when I can't do it, and when I can, I try to get myself into it as much as possible. One thing I've found extremely helpful in that sense is to engage with my team about the fact that I want to do that, and I, try really hard. And that actually is a privilege you get as a soup. I have all these amazing people working on the team, and I can ask them to show me a bit of what they do and learn from them. And usually people are quite happy to do that, because it's their skill and they're happy to share. So I really enjoy that. Is again, I feel like is a very fortunate positions to be in, right? Because I can have some of the best people doing a specific task to just show me what they do.
And they must
I
be
also find it's quite bonding as an experience, right? To just explore their job that way. So that's kind of what I do more, I would say, rather than try and do things myself. I try and work with my colleagues and ask them, specific, detailed questions about their technical approaches on things. So that way I can kind of keep in touch with it. I can connect with them, and and enjoy the whole thing throughout, because of course I love that stuff.
Yeah, and that's probably a really good experience for the artists, and seeing that you're humble and asking them for advice and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure about if it's because I'm humble. It's more because I really want to do it, and I just want to take the stuff out of their hands if I could, but I can't. So yeah, it's because it's really you know how it is, right? When you see someone doing something very well, it inspires you to do it as well.
Yeah.
Right? To me, that happens daily. When someone submits a good render, I feel like I want to do some rendering, right? When someone submits a good simulation, I feel like, oh, I could do a bit of that, but it's just because they're doing such good work and they inspire you to try and do it. It's yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, we talked about this, that it's hard to find the balance, and especially I know we talked about this with some new leads and soups at Important Looking Pirates, about how to think about like setting their expectations for how much they can do hands-on work and how much they should just be a lead and stuff like that. And especially when you're first getting to leading, for example, then you might have to put more time aside for the
Yeah.
leadership part.
Yeah.
But how do you like? And yeah, I know at the same time a lot of artists are a bit hesitant because they don't want to lose touch with being creative, like they want to be hands-on. Do you have advice, or like how do you coach someone into like taking that step and daring to become a supervisor, or like
Yeah,
what would
no,
you say to someone like that?
I understand. Yeah, I mean, this is a in progress answer because, as I said, it's something I wanna. I'm not successful at it myself now, so the only thing I can give is examples and advice. So as of now, the way I'm thinking about it is like this. I think um, when you step into leadership, you take responsibility of some sort, right? So that is something that cannot be ignored, really. So you need to make sure that you are fulfilling the responsibility you've agreed to. And it could be, running a sequence or running a whole show, right, or a whole department. And I I think that means that you first need to make sure that everybody that is in your team to achieve that goal needs to be aware of what they're supposed to do, right? So that's the most important thing. You got to spend your time in that uh, sphere, right? Of briefing, clarifying, asking, if the brief or clarifications were good. So that's something that really needs as much time as possible. That said, if after that you find yourself with time, then knock yourself out, because of course if you do keep in touch with the job itself, your team will have much more respect for you because they know that you try your hardest as well, and when you talk to them, you know what you're talking about because you're doing it as well. It's very, very important, especially when you're in kind of department soup roles or sequence supervisors or leads. All of those roles are very important. It's very important that you do the job as well, right? Um, and I think also the balance there is achieved by talking to your team, like that. Most of the time, sorts everything out, right? And by your team, I mean your team at large, meaning the people that also are next or above you in terms of hierarchy, so that they know that you want to try to achieve that balance, right? So you can say to production, I'm very happy to try and do all of these tasks and take this bigger responsibility, but I want to make sure I have time to also produce all of this work myself. And that is something that more and more I think production teams are very aware of, that the importance of desk time. So not just having meetings and rounds and all of that. I hear of that more and more, right? And I think the shows and companies don't want to lose also the talent that comes with these people that are promoted to leads or supervisors of sorts. So there is an interest really of enabling you to do also your job apart from supervising or briefing or supporting. But one of the things I will say though is that when you're in leadership positions also, and it's not to be underestimated, I think I've learned so much by helping other people out, right? Like by trying to solve, because also most of the times people come out with problems that you never had. So all of a sudden you're part of trying to solve a problem that otherwise you wouldn't have encountered. So I think there's a lot to be said about that, about remaining hands-on just by helping other people. This is again, for roles that are more in the lead or head of department sphere, of course. Maybe in VFX supervision is a bit harder, but there are situations where you get involved, but then naturally you become not the first port of call because there are like specialists on your show that are approached first. So that's
Yeah,
that's a few thoughts on that in that
yeah.
sense.
And I guess
Could go on
it's
for hours.
there isn't a good there isn't a like a clear answer, because if you want to be like the perfect leader and you spend all your time being a leader, then you're losing that creative like connection.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
then you won't be the best supervisor
Exactly.
because you lose that touch.
Yeah, I think one thing I could say from my personal experience, that maybe can help in terms of an advice, is that don't feel like you have to burn through the steps too fast. Meaning, as I said before, I was really lucky. I was at DNEG when DNEG was growing, so lots of opportunities were there, right? That meant is that pretty much every show I was going one step up the hierarchy of the show ladder, right? Um, which was good fun. Now, in hindsight, uh, I probably would have stuck longer in each role instead of taking the opportunity and moving up so quickly, because that was the right time for me to develop, right? And I was enjoying it, but I was so keen, to know more in terms of the process itself, to be exposed to more. And I thought I could make it all work, but the truth is that at one point you can't. At one point you're going to have too much on your plate, and you won't be able to do everything you did before as well, right? So I think the real solution there, in fact, I think some of the best supervisors in the industry are the ones, that did many years in the trenches, and they were truly amazing artists for a long time. And then, they move up still, of course, in responsibility and all the rest, but they, they've done it for so long, it's like riding a bicycle for them, right? Because so I think that was probably my biggest mistake, was to just take the opportunities that came instead of like being more aware that would take away from my time on the box, and kind of push back against it, and say like, oh, that's great, but I'd like to do another show like this, or another 2 shows like this. I mean, again, hindsight, always 2020, right? And maybe that way has other issues. Of course, I've only one experience, and I am just guessing that probably would have been better for me. But I don't know. I think as everything, if you take it easy and talk to your colleagues about it, you can get to a pretty good balance, right? And when I say take it easy, I mean like not getting too stressed about either way, even if you get too much of one or too much of the other. Like, is something good about really making the most of what you're doing at the moment and try and learn the most of that, instead of thinking, oh, I should be more on the box, or I should be more of a leader, or I should be more. Just try and do the best you can with what you have, and at least that experience will then be 100% learning experience. If you spend half of that time worrying about your balance, or that's something I'm learning again myself. I spend so much time like worrying about, oh, I haven't done any tutorial, or I could have done that thing and I haven't done it. Instead of worrying about that, I should just, do the best of the next thing that I have available. There's always something to do, right? There's always something to do for everybody.
Yeah.
So maybe try and do that. Try and figure out what needs to be done.
Yeah. That's something I'm always a proponent of, like following what you enjoy doing, and not, like I tell this to students all the time, that don't think too much about, oh, I need to learn all these parts to be able to become this role, like get this
Yeah.
job. But do what you enjoy, and then you will find the right job for that. So if you don't,
Yeah, exactly.
if you enjoy
Exactly.
just being a lead, you don't have to stress about becoming a supervisor. There's no.
Yeah, exactly. And I think studios definitely can do more moving forward about promoting that, so that, and I think they are. I mean, I've seen that in every size studios, that there is a change there where they're trying to promote that, you don't need to be because VFX supervisor is not a better job, is a different job, right?
Yeah.
Than, let's say, a sequence lead, or an environment supervisor, or a head of build. They're just different jobs.
Yeah.
They have different expertise. And when I encounter these people that have made a career out of one of these, specific jobs like layout or modeling, and they're amazing at it, and they're happy with it, like you learn so much from these people, right? Because they really they understood that, right? They were like, okay, well, this is what I like doing, and I'm just gonna get great at this,
Yeah, and I can feel
and that's
jealous
something.
of
Yeah,
people like that. Like,
yeah.
damn it,
I
I wish
mean,
I could just be happy with doing
yeah,
something and then become really good at it, not
yeah,
having to try everything, like new stuff all
yeah.
the time.
But then, again, you can be happy about that as well. Like, you can, as long as you accept, because happiness always comes from acceptance, right? I mean, it's if you accept what you're gonna miss going one direction. I mean, that's the wrong way of putting it, right? It's not you're gonna miss. I mean, you're gonna accept that that's, this is what you're gonna get instead. Let's put it that way, instead of missing. So, I'm gonna get all of this if I do the path that you say, which is very similar to mine, right? About wanting to be interested in everything. I'm not going to be, the best modeling person or rigger, right? But I'm going to get to talk to them, and experience it through their eyes, and I'm going to get to do other things that are fulfilling and rewarding, right? It's so I think that's, it's a balance, the being on the box or being not on it.
Yeah.
But I think that there's got to be, there's a balance that needs to be. I mean, it's our job is made of this, so you gotta do some of it. Otherwise, it's a bit weird.
Cool. Uh, so when you have grown, like
Mm,
you said, maybe too quickly, rised in the
mm,
ranks,
mm.
what have you learned, or like how have you views on leadership changed with your experience?
Yeah. I think the biggest breakthrough was, like seeing that they were, they were all people, and you have failings, no matter the level you're at. It doesn't mean because you're in that role that you get it right more often. Which is why I said I was really lucky in terms of the supervisors and producers I worked with over the years. Um, they have been very open in that sense, right? Something to really appreciate, when people are not trying to put up a facade of, they know what they're doing. It's like, when they're very vulnerable, let's say, they don't lose any respect. I don't lose any respect for them. They still like the top dog or whatever you want to say, right? But actually, even more so if I see they're very happy to be vulnerable about themselves and say, yeah, actually, I don't know anything of this. So can you check it out, right? Um, so that was the biggest breakthrough, and it's kind of, I think, what's important to try and pass on is this of like, you know it's it's fine to be open about your what you don't know. Actually, is important, not fine. And so that was the biggest surprise, was that, right? Is that because I kind of come from, I didn't know anything about visual effects until I uh, quite late, when I started getting into them in my 20s. Um, I still grew up in a time where there was no all this amount of resources, right? And so like I kind of assumed that you were a supervisors out of just being the best at everything, and that's how it went. And some people are like that. They do exist, supervisors that are actually the best, but not me and not many others. It's just that you're just going that route because, again, you enjoy, for instance, like me, seeing it all, or you enjoy having responsibility, right? And so yeah, so it was that, right? It was just the realization that, we're all part of the same team. I remember one time I was putting together a structure org chart of sorts at DNEG, and it kind of occurred to me that maybe you could see all the leadership and hierarchy in the leadership more as a support structure rather than hierarchy in terms of like top down scenario, right? So like the higher you are, actually the more support you're supposed to give, if that makes
Yeah,
sense, right?
that's
Because
really good.
ultimately it comes from the artist, the work, right? It will always do. And so you got to enable them to do it. And so you're supporting them, really. You're not driving. I mean, most of the artists nowadays, especially, they know very well what they're doing, right? So the main thing you have to do is to just not waste their time and make sure that they know what they're supposed to do. And 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 that's it. And that's what, I think it should be in terms of leadership and supervision. And so that probably again was the biggest breakthrough, is that you don't have to be the person that knows it all. You have to be the best supporter, right?
Yeah.
Are you supporting? You're a very good helper in terms of, and helping doesn't need to be that you're the one that will solve it. It means maybe like, oh, I know the best person for you to sort this out, so go talk to them. That's amazing help, of
Yeah.
course. And you've done a very good job in that sense, right? If you are able to redirect people like that.
Yeah, and also as you said,
And
like giving people space to
yeah,
struggle and maybe fail. And
yeah, exactly. And then that's super hard,
yeah,
And it's hard to give space sometimes to people that know exactly what they're doing. If they're doing the job that you were doing, just before, like I had that so many times. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that would like to knock me in the head because of that. Because if I was let's say I was doing environments until the previous show, and then I'm a CE Soup, and then there's an environment supervisor, that poor soul is going to have the worst time of their lives because unless I'm a grown up, which I wasn't when I was in those situations, or I'm not still. I would like, oh, but I know exactly what you should do there, so let me tell you. And that's the worst thing you can do, right? Because I mean, that's their job now. Your
yeah,
job is to not to say I know what you should do. Your job should be, so here's the briefs, and these are these are your team, and these are the things that they can do better. Off you go. This is what we need to do.
yeah.
So figure it out. That'd be the best, of
And
course.
also
And
letting them know that you are available for support. And I know there's a
yeah.
lot of a lot of leaders talk about that they have this open door policy and stuff like that, but it doesn't make any difference if you're sitting in your office by
Well
yourself.
done.
Like, how do you make the people under you in the hierarchy know that you are there?
Yeah. Well, that goes back to well done. I think that's ultimately why I was saying that question. When you sit down and you want to do hands-on work, you have to ask yourself first. Am I positive that everybody knows what they're supposed to do? Everybody's got everything. My experience is that the moment you shoot out a message and say, "Hey, how you feeling about this? All good?" Most of the times they just get back to you and go, "Oh, actually, I would like," So as you said, like, yeah, the door was open, but they weren't gonna walk in, which is nothing on them, right? I mean, you're swamped in your day and you got stuff to deal with, which is why it's so important that the soups and the leads do that effort of going and asking if everything's all right, because then it will come out.
Yeah,
I know a lot. Like sometimes, I guess when you go through leadership as well, you get this frustration, right? Of when you learn of something that went wrong. It's like, why didn't you tell me about it? Which is true, and you tell them like, remember, next time if something is that say the sooner you say there's an issue, the better it is, right? Because then we have time to fix it. But I think again, going back to the idea of support chain, I think it's your responsibility to make sure that they have got questions asked to them, to give them a chance to say that actually stuff was wrong, because maybe they're just losing themselves in it.
yeah,
And I'm not saying that again, it's not who's right, who's wrong. That's also another thing. Like, it's terrible, right? Who's right, who's wrong. It's not about that. It's just that if everybody tries to empathize, I guess that's the word, right?
yeah,
Because you've done it before, you know how it is. You know what you get lost. And yes, I mean, it was very. The best thing probably happened to me, but that's something I didn't do. That's I'm just lucky. I'm like that. I just loved, and this is back when studios were normal, like no, remote thing. I loved, standing up and going asking questions instead of writing emails. And I didn't realize then. I realize now that's really what got me all this additional, responsibility, opportunities of going, in the different roles of lead and soup and all of that. It's because I was this, I would just stand up and go and talk to people. And if I wasn't clear, I would just grab two people and go to the third person and then talk all together. And that's all it is, really. And you can do it with these tools as well, of course. But I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the walking around the floors and, grabbing peeps and talking about stuff. Instead of sending emails and
yeah.
stuff. Although I've learned in the years that the downside of that is that you don't have any trails of what's been said. So, there's always a downside to everything.
Yeah.
So you connected better that way, but at the same time, it would end up that maybe it was a bit too messy, right?
Yeah.
Because then you don't know what's been said. It depends, of course, of the levels and stuff. When you're an artist or a lead, I guess that's not too bad. It's better to connect
Yeah.
with people. Just go and talk to them.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
But something I was thinking of was, why artists don't raise problems if they're stuck, or if they're like they don't have what they need. That it can be really easy to see that your supervisor is super stressed, so you don't want to disturb them, or like, no, but
yeah.
Like how should you as an artist think about that? Like, should you disturb your supervisor or your lead, or should you like put your head
Yeah, I
down?
think you should. I mean, because ultimately, it's I always I love when people come to me and tell me about problems. I mean, that's what I'm there for. That's what the job is. It makes it so much easier. I mean, of course, there are ways of raising things. Like, I mean, don't go around people that should be involved in the conversation. Make sure production is involved because they are the ones keeping track of everything that is happening. So there are ways of doing it, and people know what the ways are. But that said, do it. Like, don't hold back. Of course, I understand that that's not always easy. Of course, it isn't. But that's why it's such a good thing, right? Good things are the hard ones. Like if it was easy, then shows will run perfectly all the times because all the problems will come up right away. You kill them, and that's it. End of the day. But it isn't easy. It's hard because it is that's why I think about the vulnerability is an admission that you kind of don't know what you're doing. It sounds bad, especially in English. You say you don't know what you're doing, but not in that way. Like, of course, let's say you're out of your depth. That's bad. It's all bad, but the connotation is bad. But it isn't bad. It's just like, hey, I'm stuck. I don't know what to say, but it's fine. So, which again, I think I was very fortunate in my years. Whenever I did that, I was never greeted with anger or dismissal,
Yeah.
but always with welcome. Especially production team. I mean, I really love production as a job. I think the crew and the skill of production is amazing, and I maybe too much. Some I really love talking to producers and line producers and PMs and all those peeps. And they love that. They love you raising shit, right? They love it. Most of them are super into it. Like you saying, hey, I've got this issue. Like, oh, no worries. Let's go and talk to so and so, and you'll fix it out, right? So maybe that's the way. Maybe raise it to production because most of them don't are always in that mindset of openness to issues because again that's literally the main thing they do is that, right? Is plan the show, make sure the plan goes according as the agreed things, and then move on from there.
Yeah. And of course, it never
Wait,
goes according to plan, so they have to solve the
yeah,
problems all the time.
sorry, I think I've got a little one here.
Yeah.
Give me a second.
No
Sorry.
worries.
Okay. So again, so I think production is a good way to go and and ask them for help and support. And if you don't want to go to your lead for whatever reason, you always have the equivalent, right? But in production, but you shouldn't be afraid. I mean, and to be honest, I think also if the outcome is negative of you raising the issue, I think that's good. Also because you've learned that it's those people are not very supportive. I mean, if they weren't so very supportive, it was going to come out at one point or the other. So just to sit on stuff is not good, right? No matter what. And but it's hard to bring it out. But you most of the times I think you'd be very surprised of how good it is, especially if you do it early. Like the first time to do it is when you get briefed, right? If you get briefed and it feels daunting and too much, you should say it. You shouldn't. I mean, unless is that daunting, you're like, yeah, this is a big challenge. I want to deal with it. That's one thing. If you feel like, oh my god, I'm never gonna be able to do this, try and ask. clarifications until you feel like you actually, because people like myself that brief other people, most times we don't know if it's really achievable, even if of course you want to project that you know. But the truth is, like you trust the skill of you working with, and and you want to do something amazing. But the problem is when you outline what you want to do and you think is doable, because you trust those people. You're like, oh, I think you can achieve this. It's great. I've seen what you've done. It's amazing. I want you to do this. But maybe they don't think that. So it's important that they're either, again, ideally, it should fall on who's the supervisor to ask the question and say, is that all right? How does that feel? Like if we say that the deadline is this date, and remember, that means that we need to see it in the middle of it. Is that okay? Like, do you feel like you can achieve that? And, so that's what the soup can do. And the artist, what they can do is saying, oh, that feels, when do you want this by? They're like, well, I want it by Friday. It's like, oh, that feels quite a lot. But then, we get into the other conversation where the best way to say that you can't do things is to offer alternatives, if alternatives are available, right? To say like, well, I can't do it all rendered, but I could give you a play blast of it. Just to say for an effect, right, of an explosion or whatever else. It's like I could give you a play blast so you can evaluate timings, size, placement, layout of it, but I can't render it by then. I can't pass it to comp by then. And again, most of the times I think people go like, that's awesome. That's what I care about. I just want to see what it looks like in terms of layout,
Yeah.
And so that's it. I mean, we talked about that many times, you and me. I mean, it's all about communication, right? It's just, and communication is not always necessarily coming from the person being asked to do something. It's also from people asking, right? To say, this is all I'm asking, but also just to be, and that is the thing I fail the most at still today, right? I feel like I've given a good brief, and then I realize I've omitted so many things that could have helped that person understand better what I wanted.
Yeah.
It's that's really terrible. Like I hate that. I don't know. I guess you just keep on doing it. And I think again, vulnerability, and just flag it. Like I always say, and I think for some people it's quite funny, but I do mean it. Like when I say like I really need people to help me because I'm a bit thick, right? I forget things, and that's why I love production so much. They're there to literally remind you all the things, and so it's all about the clarity, right, between the parties that are interacting.
Yeah.
Seems obvious, right? That's what it is. It seems obvious, but as you know very well, it's where it falls down most of the times. Kind of feel like that's the biggest problem of nowadays visual effects. In the sense, not that it's gotten worse, not in that sense at all. Actually, I think it's getting better. But I think doing the work is, I mean, there's so many amazing artists. Technology's gone to crazy places. If you're clear about what you need and everybody's agreed, the time allowed, that's the way it's hard, right? That's why iterations are hard. And, is the client going to change their mind, or is my internal soup going to change their mind, right? That's really what bogs down projects. It's not the even the stuff when you get multiple shows rendering all at the same time. It's not that the stuff is too heavy to render, is that there was a breakdown in communication. When a show said, well, we're going to finish this time. So it's all there. That is the problem. There's nothing that you can really achieve in terms of an effect, but you can break down communications getting there, for sure. Yeah. that's what happens the most.
Yeah, you came up with a really good point there, that someone have bidded this project and maybe they don't know if it's doable. And if you can remember that, as if you're a lead or a supervisor, to not just accept that this should be doable in this time frame, so I just have to find the right way. But if you're a sequence supervisor and you doubt that it can be done, that it might actually be valid. It's not like divine law that this is how the project should be done.
No. Yeah, no, exactly. Especially our job that is very, you know, there's so many ways to skin a cat.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know. Is that a way of saying? I confuse Italian and English way of sayings, and I birth horrible things. But there's many ways of doing
Yeah.
things, of course, and you
And it's
know,
so much guesswork.
I really learned that jumping between companies, right? And I think it's so beautiful that, you know, like in some companies you just approach a certain way and it works super well, and you know in the previous place you were at it would never have worked, and conversely you see them struggling with something that the previous company was so easy
Yeah.
to do. And isn't that funny, because that goes back again to people, right? Isn't it? You know, there was no need to say it, of course, but it is all about the team you have. I mean, even those processes that seem removed from people, truly they come from people. Like, let's say in this company, so great, you know, the renders we do, well, it's because probably you have amazing lighting artists, right? Or like if a specific part of the pipeline works really well, but someone set it up, so you had the right team
Yeah.
there. And even if you want to remove it even further, like, well, then the decisions were made correctly. That's still people, you know. Computers are just
Yeah.
doing stuff that they're told.
So I want to get back to, like, if you start to become a lead or get a leadership
Yeah.
position, how do you think you should approach that? Like, do you have any, because it tends to be a lot of leadership advice is so general that it's really hard for
Mm,
an artist that just thinks about, can I become a lead or can I take that step? Like, what do you do on your
yeah.
first day as a lead of a few people, or like anything like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that can help?
Uh, I can share one experience from my career, but I can, to first answer to your, not answer, but to kind of expand on what you just said. I mean, that is hard, right? And the more you go up in the leadership chain, let's say, the harder it is to have the booklet of what the job is. That's something that just is what it is. Because again, all companies are different. All the shows are different. The variables are so many. So then it is kind of okay to revert back on the general. Well, what are the most important? Because it's all about attitude, right? Now you approach it. So it's about, you know, being open, being communicative, being, you know, again, to me, it's like showing vulnerability. It's absolutely fine, actually, encouraged, I would say. Um, and then, yeah, and then, you know, those general guidelines are still good. Then in the specific, usually it's easier on the specific
Yeah.
people, right? Because people are so different. And then, you know, it's not just you, it's also who you got in your team, right? You can have a team of very introverted people, and then you got to deal with them a certain way, or you got a team of very expansive and angry people, and you got to deal with them another way. And by deal, a deal again, you know, terms that sound a bit wrong, like it's not deal like you got to deal with them, right? It's more like how do you enable them? There you go. Um, to do their best
Yeah.
work, and also have a decent time. Right? I don't say good time because sometimes it's not possible to have the best time of your life all the times, but at least, you know, feel like they are being engaged for their skills, and it's fun and they're
Yeah.
learning, right? So, but it's so different. I mean, if, it depends. You know, if you put me on a TV show with a small team of this type of personalities, uh, but I'm not trying to skirt here the. I'm not trying to go away from your question. So that's why, again, you know, I can give you some examples. So, for instance, one of the biggest things that still sticks with me is the first show I did as CG Soup. Not as a, I already did. I did one show as a CG Soup, and it was a smallish type show. Then the next one up was really big, really really big, and you know, and I went in feeling pretty good because the show I did before I was doing pretty well, and then when I started this, I felt a bit like it was a big mess. I was like, what the hell is this? You know, lots of people talking over each other and all of that, um, and truly, what worked for me in the end and really changed the whole show, like from being a hellhole to actually one of the ones I'm really happy about. Like it's as an experience, was to just do the classic thing you hear so many people saying, but it's very true. Like just breaking down problems, taking one by one, and also so like big massive problems, just break them down, just start dealing with the things you can tackle, and start clearing the table of issues. But also it was to, this is very personal to me though, if it helps anybody, right? It's to not take it too personally about like if you're not involved in things, or if people were not talking to you about issues, or you're not being called in specific meetings, and you're like, well, I should be there, I'm a CG sub now, why am I not in that meeting, right? That is the devil, right, of the VFX, of like taking you down into this dark hole of like, why am I not involved, or whatever, right? And the truth is that nobody's thinking about you. Of course, most of the time, nobody cares about you. They're just caring about the shit they're doing, right? All the problems they're trying to solve. And so what you got to do is just stand up. And that's, in that case, I could do it physically because it was still like office time. And just walk around and start figuring out what needs doing that you could help with. And that was like, it was really like magic, There's a lot of things you hear in life where, like magic, like start doing this and then you're going to sleep better, right? And then you try and it doesn't happen. You don't really sleep better or whatever. But so for me, those things never work, maybe because I don't do it right. But this thing worked, of like just standing up and just literally walk around and ask everybody how you were doing and do you need anything. I started finding things, and that magically changed everything, because all of a sudden I was being helpful, again going back to what we were saying before, right, to people. And then naturally people will go like, oh, actually, it was helpful that time, let me involve them in this conversation. So then you were getting more. It was just a catch 22 of, it was a good spiral, it was going up, right? And all it took was for me to stop thinking all that rubbish that was spinning around in my head of why not, why I was being left out of meetings and stuff like that, and just try and help who needed help. That random, meaning like it wasn't, well, what should be my job? Because there's a lot of requests always of knowing what should be my job and what should be which is correct, and it should be, and companies should strive to give job descriptions to people and everything. But sometimes that's hard and almost impossible, because again, the variables I was saying are so many. There's so many variables. Again, back to your question, what was the update? What did you realize when you moved up in leadership roles? Well, there was that, right? There's so many variables all the times, and we try, as human beings, to put it all into little boxes so that we can just have a plan to action on. It's not going to happen, especially in visual effects, where everything is so fast, so quick. Technology changes constantly. People come and go. Extremely different characters, right? Very happy-go-lucky people. Very, people that are they just want to do their stuff. They just want to bog down into it. Don't talk to me. It's just all different, right? Which is beautiful. This is the best job in the world, isn't it? You have all this amazing, cross section of humanity, and you're doing movies and TVs. Fantastic. And so again, I think the biggest job description of leadership is just that, right? Just try and see where you can help and what you can do, and try and figure out that, And the best thing for me I found is just to talk to people and ask them what's happening, and then you find things to do, and then you do that again. Going back to our original point of, focusing on that, happy that you got your task, do your task, do it well, and then things will happen from there. For me again, that was it was the biggest turning point. I still remember it so well. I remember the moment I stood up physically, because I was at my desk being really miffed that I was being left out of another meeting of some sort. I don't again, you don't remember what it is. Of course you don't, because it doesn't matter. But something there, thankfully, I guess, I've been exposed to better soups than I before. Something kind of clicks, like just stop whinging, and just stand up and go ask. And that was definitely a key moment for me. And I kept on doing it as much as I can. But you can always improve, of course, in that respect, down that path. improvement is never
Yeah.
ending. You know, it's yeah.
And
So that would be, sorry, a bit of a confused answer there, but I feel that's the
yeah,
important stuff of in terms of advice for someone that moves into leadership, is just to take it less personally and try and see where you can do the most
yeah,
amount of good, by intervening and helping
yeah,
out. And don't get too upset if it's not part of your job description.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
your job description is just at least if you take it as this is all I'm doing, I think you're doing it wrong. I think his job description is more like this is the basic you should cover, right? That the company managed to think of. All the experiences they had, they were like, okay, so what did we do with those CG subs? Yeah, that worked well, so let's put it as part of the job description. What do we want? What the producers say they always want? They want this stuff. Let's put it as job description. That's how job description happened, right?
yeah,
It's an afterthought of experience, but you don't know about the future. So if you want to be part of the future, I think you gotta be open to the fact that your job description is just the base,
yeah,
and it's great to have them. They really help. Um, you know, but they don't. The best thing is that you have a flexible approach to what you're supposed to do. Because sometimes you might have someone in your team or your colleague that is amazing at a half of your job description, right? And the best thing there would be to let them cover all of that and you do something else with your
mm,
now free time. Because otherwise, what you see oftentimes is that people will clash on those overlapping responsibilities. And then companies try to resolve it by having more strict job descriptions. And that could possibly kill some. Again, it's a balance as
yeah,
everything. But it really helped me to be flexible, doing what
yeah,
needed to be done rather than, expecting
yeah. That's some great
mm,
advice. And
that.
I came to think
Yeah.
about some experiences in my career where, especially the production team, maybe because they're more used to like looking around, where can I do the most good? And many
Yeah.
times it's been that me as an artist, I've been working late or something, and someone have come by and just, do you need anything? Like, do you want food for tonight? Or and maybe it's not under job description to go pick up McDonald's, but like that has been the most valuable thing in the moment. And when they're not like too good to do that, if they can just, yeah, of course, I'm gonna do that. Or someone dropping in at the
Yeah.
office if you're working a weekend, and then the producer comes by with their kids or whatever and just to check in on you. That's like, it's not in their job description, but maybe it's
Yeah.
the best thing they can do. uh,
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Exactly. And
yeah.
no, totally.
But something
Mm.
that I want to go back to when you talk about these different peoples, that there's like super introverted people and
Yeah.
some very extroverted people and all kinds, and
Yeah.
in between. Like, do you think a lot about how you talk to different people, or do you ask them how they want to get their feedback or stuff like that?
Yeah. I don't think I do it enough. That I think is a very good thing to do. To kind of ask people how they how they'd like to be approached. But then again, some people would judge you, right? Like if you ask that question, for them, will be like, well, why is he asking me that? Just get on with it, because they're just that matter of
Yeah,
fact kind of people, right? So, yeah, I think ultimately the most important thing in that relationship is that you are yourself, right? Like that you don't try and be too, um, like flexibility doesn't mean that you should be lying about who you are,
mm,
right? And just go and completely adapt to some characters to fit them and vice
yeah,
versa, right? Um, but that said, I think you do have to do a bit of that job of trying and empathize with them and why they are that type of person, and um, and then treat them accordingly, right? So if yeah, I mean that's the job, is just to try and get them to be comfortable, because that's when then and to gain their trust, which again why you can't lie and say that you're, oh, I'm so introverted as well, or something like
Yeah.
that, right? Like, well, if you're not, because also, like, again, because it's all about trust. If they can see through that, which people do, because it's very easy to catch you, then it's worse. Then you're gonna make more
Yeah.
damage, right? Um, so it's more about, for instance, openly saying, like, oh wow, you're quite extreme in this and that way, but that's cool. Like, if you really don't want to talk about certain scenarios, or you don't want to be involved at all in one thing, I'm happy to leave you out. I think he's extreme, but that's okay. Like, as long as you're cool. So I think, it's the kind of mix of giving them the truth, but also accepting that they have a full right to be the way they
Yeah.
want to be, right? Especially, again, this job that is such a, like, people really care about what they do in this industry, which is one of the amazing things of it.
Yeah.
So I think they deserve that space of being whoever they choose to be. Ultimately, we all know what we're here to do, right? Is to deliver a specific um, element or shots or schedules or whatever you're doing, right? So, I, yeah, sorry, I don't have like very smart answers beyond just, yeah, talk, to them and be honest about who you are, and you do have to accept everything and everybody, unless they're outrageous about
Yeah.
something specific. They're violent or something. Although, there's limits to violence as well. If they're not too violent, no, I mean, you can't say that. but like, it, it's I actually love that, like, you have, again, all these different people, and they can really click between each other as well, right? Given the right
Yeah.
situation. The important thing for you as a soup or a lead or producer is to diffuse always the situation, of course, between different characters, and try and make everybody. Yeah, that's a big one. Is you're trying to make everybody sees everyone else point of view. It's a big one,
And how
very
do you do
hard,
that?
because sometimes you might be well, I don't know. You try, and it's hard. You need a lot of introspection, because sometimes you are very in agreement with one and not at all in agreement with the other person. But I still think you need to be super partner. You need to be able to um, still try and see and make see the other person's point of view to approach that. And if you really believe strongly that something shouldn't be done a specific way, of course, then that is your job as well, to make a call, right? Sometimes it's just like, well, now we have to decide which way to go. I'm going to decide we go this way. But again, ask yourself the way you're doing it, if it's fair. That's it. Are you doing it because you really like that person, or are you doing it because you really believe that's the best way? Or and if you really believe that's the best way, based on what? Like, so again, it's always about. I think I go back to the asking yourself questions.
Yeah.
I don't do it often enough.
Yeah.
It's hard, because it's the job is hard already. So to challenge yourself on top of the job itself, it's hard. But I think
Yeah.
that's what it is. It's always like that, though. I mean, then, if you're a lead or a soup, you are more involved in different things, so you will get more rewarding experiences that way. But then you have to accept you're going to have more responsibility to deal with.
Yeah. What's your take on, like, how do you deal with someone if they're not performing as well as you would expect, or if they're behaving badly, or like
Mm.
behaving, like talking inappropriately to someone else, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a hard one as well. And I go back to the honesty is always the best, of course, and timing also. Like, you need to approach it as fast as you can. Sometimes it's not possible, and there's always this hard part of, like, if the bad behavior happens during a delivery, do you just talk to them right away? Which ultimately I will try and do more in the future, because I think maybe you should like not care so much about the delivery, that you let people get along without knowing what's coming, right? Because it's always not nice when you get that surprise afterwards when you thought it was all fine. Um, but yeah, I mean, you just have to go to people to let them talk as well. Like you have to let them explain why a certain situation they think has arisen, and then you know, be honest and tell them how it is. Um, and that's it, and kind of take it from there. Because anyway, there's no sugarcoating, right? I mean, everything you will not deal with, it will fester. And maybe not for you, maybe for someone else. That's a hard one, right? When you just let people move on without
Yeah.
feedback, that will happen again. And maybe you know what will happen again is not them being bad, is you creating a situation that make people like them be bad,
Yeah.
right? Because that's very classic, right? Some people, I mean, why you've been in many meetings like that, right? You're in some meetings like someone, I think this person is amazing, you think they're terrible. Well, what's the truth? The truth is neither. Is that like everybody, they're good and bad. And so, yeah, the best thing is to just talk it out and try and get to the bottom of what actually is creating that situation. 'Cause sometimes, it's just that the schedule is
Yeah.
unrealistic. That's all. That's why it was becoming such a. It's not that they were bad or you're asking for too much. Is that the timings agreed? So maybe you need to go all the way back there and say, well, that's not going to happen in this time frame. Or you, maybe it was the way you were talking about some things. They were misunderstanding, but not because of their fault. It's because the way you said it. And I get that so many times. It's terrible. Um, it's yeah. So it's tackle it right away. I would say the advice is, and go to the end of it. Don't, anything that comes out needs to be dealt with. That's the only way. I think like if you care about someone, you will do that.
Yeah.
If you don't, then don't do it. I mean, that's it. Like if if you think you're never going to see that person again and you're never going to work together again for whatever reason, not true, by the way. The industry classic thing that says, oh, the industry is so small, right? All of that. So I think you got to deal with it, really.
Yeah.
And if you're the lead, I think it is a bit more you to start a conversation rather than the other
Yeah.
person. I feel lucky. I've been lucky a lot in my career. Have people coming to me and saying, "This is not cool, man," and that really helped me because ultimately all the bad stuff goes away, and you want to have only good relationship moving forward, right? You don't want to leave any bitterness.
Yeah.
That's crazy
Yeah.
talk. Why
And so
would you,
many things like that
right?
can be so easily like resolved. Usually it's just like,
Solved.
oh, I
Yeah,
didn't know. Well, let's just do it
exactly.
that way.
If Exactly. Now, in the specific, if someone is not performing in terms of like they're not doing the right thing, then it's about casting, right? And it's about putting the right person there. It's important when you remove someone from a specific job is that they know why they've been removed from it. And that can be very nicely said. It's hard because people have a lot of pride. Everybody does,
Yeah.
but you got to tell
Yeah.
them. Don't do. I've seen it done a lot of times where you just come in without saying the truth about like this new team member that is there to fix problems, right? You say, "Oh, it's just a new team member," and I think the people involved that see their job being taken away by this person, they know, oh, okay, that's what they're doing, right? They're fixing my shit
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
proxy. But I wouldn't say. I mean, it's hard. I'd say to people that are already leaders that I understand. I mean, because you already have so much going on. You're trying to deliver the show, trying to get it out. You maybe already have 5 situations of people that are not happy or whatever, and that is the worst one that you got to do something about. And you're not sleeping, you're going home late. It's This goes back, to the other question, when you moved into leadership roles, it was that. It was, oh wow, okay, so there's something about it, like. But we're all people though. Like you gotta give respect up and down, right? And that's usually gonna give you the right answer.
Yeah.
If you think like, how am I gonna be respectful to this person? Then you can do pretty much anything as long as you're saying that boundary. I think it's
Yeah.
gonna work out. But it's
Yeah.
hard.
Definitely.
Um,
So, and I know that you are very, since you are working so closely with your team and you really enjoy this like interaction.
yeah,
How is
yeah.
it when you become friends with the artists you work with, and then you have to like reprimand someone, or like you have to, like, how do you deal
Mm.
with that?
Well, I've been lucky in that sense because I think if you become friends on the basis of honesty, then that's all done already, right? Because you're never going to get to that place. And that's maybe a better answer to your previous question as well. Like, you don't want to get to the place where so much is unsaid that now you need to have a chat. You want to build the whole relationship up where there is openness about um, what you think is good or not good, and what you think is lazy or not lazy, or
Yeah.
whatever, right? So if you do that way, then it's very easy to approach anything, because I mean, ultimately, if you're that way, it means that problems don't have a chance to get too big.
Yeah.
Because when something contentious starts, you already talk about it openly. I don't really like this thing. I really think this animation is terrible. That we got from whatever the other vendor or previs and stuff. We need to fix it completely. And it's like, well, actually, I think this could work. Then and then you bargain a bit, but you start right away, instead of whoever of the two thinks something, they don't say it, and then it
Yeah.
just fester, right?
Yeah.
That's it. If you're open right away, it's hard to go to crazy places where there's a lot of tensions built up. Exactly. Tensions build up, right?
Yeah.
Don't let the tension build up. And that's it. And then I think if you're a friend, then what's the problem? Like, to me, friends, you can say anything, right? So I've never had big problems in that sense. Also because, again, I don't see myself as being, I'm not the boss of you, right? I'm just in a position of different responsibility.
Mm.
And I'm clear about, that as well when I'm with people I work with and stuff. I say, like, well, look, I got to go and show this to the client, and I have to justify it. So I don't feel comfortable justifying this. I think this is not good enough,
Yeah.
you know? So can you empathize? That you're asking for empathy their side, So it's not.
Yeah.
And if they don't respect that and stuff, then I mean, are they friends then? Like, there's
Yeah.
a catch
Yeah.
22 there for me of that, right? So I think don't let anything become too big. It's not worth it, ever,
Yeah.
ever. So again, being lucky in that way, though. I think I found good people always, and people I could be very open and vulnerable with. They were back, and that way,
Yeah.
easy. Um, you know,
Cool. I think we've covered a
and
lot of stuff now. So maybe to
yeah,
wrap up a bit, like, or what
sure.
what are you what are you trying to get better at, or what, like, how do you see yourself developing? What's your focus at the moment?
Yeah. Well, I think, as I hinted at before, it's still on communication, in terms of like, trying and be as clear as I can when I ask for something, is one of the things that I really am trying to improve as much as I can, and also to be as much as possible, mm, you know, easy and chilled about situations. Uh, it's something that I need to work on, and because I mean, the stress is real, and all of us get it. But ultimately, feeding that doesn't lead to anything good. So again, I've been very fortunate to have been surrounded by people that are already at that kind of place, and I can see from them what I can learn. So those I would say is the biggest things that I'm working on, is just like my communication skills and my kind of general demeanor to be a welcoming and and chilled one. Um, I think again the industry now is in a place where there's so many talented people out there, so many, and then the question is, what can I bring to the table, right? If I'm not a genius at stuff, well, I guess I can bring a nice chilled environment if I can, right? Control that, and I can try and be clear with what I'm supposed to, what I
Yeah.
want from them. And I know with my client, with my clients, it's more about that. It's more about, I'm here to really try and make you achieve what you need, because that's why they come to you, right? They come to you because they have work to do, and they say, "Can you do this work?" And so the main goal there is to make them feel comfortable that we can definitely do that work, and I will help you getting that, with the caveat that, you know, also my team needs to be happy, and then we're
Yeah.
all good, right? And so, but that I think you can do a lot by being smart about the way you talk to your client, by giving them what they need to do their job. So you need to give them, layouts when they need layouts. You need to give them. So some things you need to put your foot down and be like, we really need to give this to our client because they need it to progress their conversation with the director, with the whomever, right? Or if he's directly with the director, you're like, well, I need to give him this so that he can continue flesh out his vision, right? So that I'm gonna ask of my team to provide. And I think that will give you trust from the client, from the director, from whomever, of saying, okay, great, this person is really helping me. Again, goes back
Yeah.
to help, right? It's really helping me do my stuff. That means I'm going to give this person a trust. And then when you have that trust, you can use it to help your team to say, hey, I know you need all of this stuff now, but we can only do so much for you because we don't have the, capacity
Yeah.
of doing more. And I think, yeah, if you work on that trust and that balance, you're good, right? So those are the things I'm focusing on the most, is to just try and be better at being clear for what I need, and be more um, measured in the way you react to new problems and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and then be better at building trust between parties, or even building trust across parties, right? So you build trust from the client in your team and vice versa.
Mm.
Very important, you know. It's also important, I think, with your team, though, to be honest about, of course, if you have some unreasonable things happening, you shouldn't just try and disguise them as, oh, this is absolutely fine. That I think when people see through that, if you go like, no, this is all super reasonable, let's just get on with it. Like, well, no, it's, because people are not, no, nobody, everybody can see through these kind of games,
Yeah.
I think. And the worst thing is that they see through it and they don't tell you that you see through it. So I think then you start fooling yourself, you're getting away with it.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think it's hard to get back from that. Then you think you're a magician of fooling people, but you're the only fool.
But
And it's hard, right? Because then you don't have trust. People don't tell you, they're seeing through you, and they only tell you like, oh, that's great, love it,
yeah.
thank you, bye.
But then I have to ask you,
It's hard.
how much do you tell your team of what the client is saying, and how like if you're, I don't know, bargaining with the client, or they want more than you
Yeah,
think you can deliver, like how much do you
I
tell your
think you.
team?
Yeah, yeah, everything. But I just want to be. I just want to have the chance to put the context right. That's it. So I don't think it's any good for, because I'm having a conversation with the client. So sometimes their notes can be an answer to our conversation. And if you as an artist were not privy to that conversation for reasons, you might take that out of context.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Like you might feel like this is worse than it actually is, or this is better than it actually is, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about context. because, again, when you work so hard on something, to get feedback that is not good, it's
Yeah.
hard. Well, you still got to see it, but I think, again, there's two ways. One is just I send you an email without notes of just like, here's your feedback. It looks like shit, and then you're like, wow. Or I can try and give it to you with context of what it means, where it comes from.
Yeah.
It's a hard balance, that one. I think ultimately you want people involved as much as possible, even in the client calls or watching client calls recordings. Like like you want to keep all of that very open. Anyway, people are reasonable. Like even the clients, if they are really unhappy, they usually approach that not in public client calls. They will just send you a side email or something like that to really escalate issues. So yeah, I think that's the answer, really. But it's hard. I'm sure people would be not feeling what I'm saying. Like it's just you try doing that and you're successful sometimes, but other times you're not, because you thought you were want to try and shield someone or.
Yeah. And of course, it's impossible to involve everyone in everything. Would take too much time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay, so one final question, the hardest one.
Please.
Like, how do you
Yeah.
balance your life and because this is what I struggle with the most at the moment with small kids.
Yeah.
Like how do you balance work and free time? Or
I don't, and that's the answer. Some people are great at this. Well, I struggle because I like this thing beyond work. So, when I didn't have work in between, companies, let's say, I was still doing this. So, like it's really hard. I think again, it's all about the responsibilities you have in your life. If you like doing tutorials and Houdini renders and all that stuff, and that's all you want to do always, and you're not letting go yourself, physically, and you're not neglecting anybody in your life by doing that, knock yourself out, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I mean, why not? But otherwise, it's all about the responsibilities you committed to in your life, and that's kind of how I'm trying to see it now. So my balance is now coming from making sure I am there for who I need to be there, and I connect with the friends and family that I should. And the rest of the time, I click away on the mouse and tablet. I mean, because I think that again, the respect of other people and their time and your commitment to them dictates everything, even going to bed, right? Because if I go to bed super late every night, of course, when other people are sleeping, they're not expecting anything of me. But if then I'm knackered in the morning and I can't deal with them because I've been, you see where I'm going, right? Then you're not respecting them, because you're like, well, you're killing yourself with this, blender stuff, and then you're not available when I need you to be, right? If that's your wife, let's say, or even for your kids, like I had situations where my kids yell at me to wake up in like other weekend, and it kind of makes you think, it's like, yeah, they really see you, of course, being tired, and just want to be a bit more in the moment. Yeah, it's your choice, your life, right? You can do what you want with it. But I think I think it in that way. So I always, again, it's about asking myself the questions of, okay, is this the right thing now to be up until 3? Of course it is. No, I mean, so then I try and balance that way. But if you really love the job and you're doing it because of that, if you're doing it because you feel like you have to, because you're forced by company, supervisors or whatever, that's a very unhealthy place to be. Then you got to ask yourself, like, what are you doing in that sense? If you have no ways of getting out of it for whatever reasons, I'm sorry, try and make it better by talking. But otherwise, get out of there. Like what are you doing? Don't kill yourself because that's the difference, right? I mean, I usually do long hours out of just wanting to do them. I'm having a blast. Uh, if you don't want to do them, then you shouldn't be doing them beyond what your obligations are that you engaged when you signed the contract, right? But beyond that, it don't fear too much, like your colleagues or whatever that might what they might think of you. You gotta be healthy for yourself and for the people you love. And they care for you. It's something, that is very important, to be fair in your life with your time to everybody else.
I've had it the last couple of days actually, where I've been home with my son who's been sick for a few days, so I haven't been able to work.
Yeah.
But then now in the weekend, I've stayed up late, like doing rigid body stuff in Houdini, trying to figure stuff out. And I know, okay, I'm going to be tired in the morning, but for my mental health, I need to get this like creative outlet, and I need to be hands-on, do this stuff, because otherwise I'm going to be like not there with my son the next day. Or I might be a bit tired, but at least I have this creative outlet.
Yeah, well done. That is an amazing point. I totally agree with about the mental health. That actually helps me as well. Like, to be able to crack a little issue or learn this new tool, it gives me such a rush of satisfaction that actually makes me happier. So even if I lost a bit of sleep, I'm going to be so much more active the next day because I'm happy, because I feel like fulfilled. I feel like I've achieved something. I feel like I managed to crack something. If I went to bed, I mean, no, that's very true. I mean, going to bed is a relative thing, right? Because if you go to bed every night at 10, but I'm doing nothing with my life as a result, only like I'm healthy, but I'm healthy, mega stressed. That's not good.
Yeah, and I've actually been there. Like, so I'm trying to get more of these late nights in now. Actually, that's on my plan, because I feel I've been focusing too much on being physically healthy, so going to bed early, working out a lot. But then I'm starting to itch. Like, I need to be learning stuff. I need to be creative, and I really love that. Like, the time where you don't, like, the family is asleep and you don't have any obligations. And then you can just spend, like, you don't have to finish on time to go pick up from preschool or something. It's just like your time.
Yeah, exactly.
That's valuable to me now. I'm starting to realize that I shouldn't be so obsessed with going to bed early every night. That's not all I need.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I totally agree. Although I could do a bit more healthy living, for sure.
Yeah, sometimes you need to go to bed as well.
Yeah.
But awesome. Exactly. This was a really, really nice conversation. And I think, we could talk.
Yeah, thank you.
For
thank
another
you,
hour easily, but let's keep it.
That's another one of the things I need to fix. Talk less. I do talk a lot.
Oh, that's good. That's good in a podcast. So that's awesome.
I guess so, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Right. This was really great.
Cheers, mate.
All right. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and learned something along the way. I particularly like the idea of looking at an organizational chart as a support structure as opposed to a command structure, where the job of the people on top is to support the people below so that they can do their job in the best possible way. Because at the end of the day, it all comes down to the artists delivering the shows, right? Just makes so much sense, but I never really thought about it that way before. Anyways, thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.